Chicago Tomahawk. I'm Mike, and I got my line mate Matt with me. And today we've got Alex with us from the Ice Guys. How you doing, Alex?
Oh, good. Glad to be on with you guys, talking my favorite team, the Chicago Blackhawks, and talking some hockey in general.
I love to hear it, man. Quick shout out to our listeners. Thank you for listening. Let us know if there's anything that you want us to cover, and we'll be sure to get it on there with you. But first off, we want to talk to Alex. And, Alex, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so originally I was born on the south side of Chicago, grew up in the Chatham neighborhood, and I was a big sports fan. My whole family, big sports fans, and they were all White Sox fans, Bears fans, Bulls fans, but didn't really watch hockey. I was kind of the one that broke the mold with hockey. And growing up being African American in the city, everybody focused on football and basketball. Didn't see a whole lot of black players on the ice, in hockey in general. So my older parents didn't really adapt to it, but I just watched it. I liked the game. I saw the speed, I saw the fighting, and I just thought it looked really cool. And even though I never played hockey, I just became a really big fan of it. And so over the years, my dad, he was in internal medicine and he's a doctor. He would get tickets for different events over the years. So he got tickets for a Blackhawks game in the mid 90s and got to go to the United Center and see that. Got to go to Wolves games out in the old Rosemont Horizon. And we became such big fans of that, where we ended up buying season tickets for years. So we watched the Wolves, but we also watched the Hawks, or sometimes listened to the Hawks, of course, as with them not being on TV in the 90s and the 2000s. So there was a lot of times all the way up until my senior year of high school, I would huddle around my room in the radio, on the radio, listening to the Hawks home games. So just became a big fan of all sports, but hockey just really gravitated and became my favorite. And over time, I ended up leaving Chicago after high school. I went to St. Rita High School, graduated, took a year off, and then I moved up here to St. Paul, Minnesota, where I'm now. I've been here for 14 years. Originally wanted to be a musician. I was a bass player and started and was in a couple of hard rock bands. But throughout the whole time, I was always a fan of sports, and I was always a fan of betting on sports. I'd always bet on football and basketball, just occasionally, and then I just took my love of hockey and decided, well, maybe I should start betting on hockey. So right around the 2011-2012 season, when the lockout season ended, I started betting on hockey games, and my music career was kind of floundering a bit. So I started just writing about what I was watching and how teams were doing against the spreads and football, and how teams were doing with the over unders in hockey, and it caught the eyes of people on Twitter. And one thing led to another. I ended up doing shows on ESPN radio out in Las Vegas. I started talking with a bunch of different people who were betting sports, and they're like, "Wow, you have great insights on betting hockey. It's a sport that most bettors don't really focus on, because everybody's betting on the NFL or NBA or even baseball in the summertime. Hockey always gets kind of looked down on in the sports betting world, kind of much like it does in the modern media of sports as well. The bigger leagues, what have you. And so it just spiraled into me having a bunch of different writing gigs, and I sell my picks online. I've had my own website. I've worked with other websites as well, and I've done various podcasts over the years, but most notably the Ice Guys, a show that I started with Ian Cameron, based out of Hamilton, Ontario, another fellow sports bettor and big hockey fan. And we've been rolling with the show now since 2017, where we're on every single day. We break down every game throughout the regular season and the playoffs. We don't miss a day. We try not to, at least. So that's been a really big thing that's kind of grown now, and we're on the National Hockey Now network, and people can listen to us, and people can interact with us on YouTube during the live shows, and we have live betcasts as well. So just if it wasn't for my dad taking me to that game and me watching games on TV, listening to the games on the radio, I don't know what I'd be doing for a career now. But it's taken me this far to where I've become a pro sports bettor, and hockey becoming my main focus.
Cool, man. Who was your favorite Blackhawk as a kid?
So I grew up, like I said, I was born in '89, so I was right around the time of the Jeremy Roenick, Ed Belfour days. But I liked some of the, yeah, exactly. And so, and I,
Just like us.
but I understood the game. I was a quick study of the game, and I knew, what the different roles were. I loved watching the enforcers, the Bob Proberts and the Cam Russells of the team, and
Yeah.
guys who, Cam was a good stay-at-home defenseman. Wasn't going to put a whole lot of points on the board, but he's going to stand up for his teammates and throw the odd body around, block a few shots. I understood those little nuances at a younger age than most. But Eddie Belfour, I mean, he was just a great goalie. He was off his rocker most of the time. It was just kind of fun to watch, and he's definitely was one of my favorites. He's probably the one I'd have to put in my number one favorite.
What about now as an adult? Who would you say your favorite is?
Oh, without question, I call him Sir Patrick Kane. I don't know if we can swear. I don't know if we can swear on this program. Is that
No,
is
no,
that
go on ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so
Go for
so
it.
so I call him
No.
Patrick fucking Kane, and that's with the utmost love and respect because that's what I screamed when the Hawks won the cup in 2010 when they were reviewing the goal, and once they finally said it was in, I was at a bar, I was at rock bottom actually with one of my best friends, and
Oh,
the first
really?
thing I screamed was Patrick fucking Kane, and we ran out of the bar. We'd already paid our tab. We paid our tab right before overtime because we knew. I told my buddy, I said, if this game ends, we win. We got to hop and hit another bar because they're going to be doing free shots probably everywhere. Sure enough, we went to a bar like a block and a half down. We run right in, and everybody's getting free shots, and that
Oh
turned
my
into
gosh.
one of the best nights of my life. And ironically enough, that was June 9th, 2010. That was the day after my 21st birthday. So
Were you?
perfect timing to drink and party for an occasion like that. Yeah.
Did you run into the team
Yeah.
at any bars that night?
That night, no, I didn't, because that was the year they clinched in Philly.
Right.
So I wasn't out. The funniest thing was I wasn't out that late where they flew back in because I had my big playoff beard and my like kind of afro going. I actually had to go get my new ID the next morning because I had a flight out. I was going to another party for my birthday in Indiana and then back here in St. Paul. So I couldn't have even stayed out that late. I think I got home at maybe 1:30 that night because I had to go
Wow.
get a haircut and a new ID so I could go continue my birthday party
Sure.
in other places. That was a really
Continue the
really wild time.
festivities.
Yeah, it was a great time, but that was probably one of the best birthday gifts I ever got was watching the Hawks finally end the curse in 2010.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
That was a great one. Yeah, like me and Mike always. I got
okay.
married during that time, and Mike always gives me a hard time because he was at my wedding and everything. But yeah,
So
it was the best
I've said
cup
this
run for
before,
sure.
man, but like my wife was like, we were just dating at the time, right?
Mhm.
So she was like, hey, I've got
Yes,
this wedding
yeah.
to go to. I was like, okay, when is it? You know, she told me the date, and I'm like, the Blackhawks are playing the San Jose Sharks that night. They
Sharks.
they could clinch it and go to the Stanley
Yeah.
Cup Finals. I'm not going to make it. And she's like, what do you? She's like, what do you mean that you're
showed
not
up.
going to make it? I'm like, no, there's no way I'm going.
Right. I mean that's
Well, the DJ,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
he gave us live updates, which was good. But I had season tickets with one of my best friends, and we ended up selling that
Yeah,
game.
it
I think
was.
it was the game where
It
Buff
was.
okay. So
got the game-winning goal. Beautiful
that
pass
was
by
was
Bowen
that
behind the
game
net, I think.
3 in overtime.
But
Game 4. Okay.
Game
okay.
4.
4, yeah.
Game 4.
It
No,
was.
the
It was when they
Buffalo
clinched.
Buffalo
Game
with
4.
the okay. So yeah.
Maybe it was 3 because
Keith
didn't
lost his
Keith get
teeth in game
hammered
4.
the
That
next
was the
game in
puck
the
to the face. Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
so that was game 3 then. So it wasn't a clincher, but I was on like
Yeah, we didn't have
like iPhones. I didn't have iPhones. We had the flip phones back then, and I can't
Oh, you know,
check anything.
yeah, I had
so
just
I got
gotten
the
an
DJs
iPhone, so I'm like, where can I find, like this data at, And I ended up going to the game, and
Yeah, but-
Matt was, how when people get married, they walk around to the crowd.
Yeah.
And Matt walked up to me.
Yeah, I was getting live
and
updates.
I was like, hey, how you doing? He's like, hey, what's the score of the game? And I was like, oh, we're up 1-0 right now. And I knew from that moment I'm gonna like this guy. You don't need to tell me your name, dude. I already know. I already know what I'm doing here, So what are your thoughts on this current team?
Well, it's interesting because we're supposed to be, at least in theory, tanking to get Connor Bedard and planning for the future, but here we are as of right now, 3-2, with some interesting wins. Obviously, not against the world beaters. We got smoked by Colorado, but then turn around and you beat San Jose, a team you should beat. They honestly are probably worse than the Hawks or even Arizona.
Yeah.
And then what an emotional and great come from behind win for against Detroit. I said it on my show, the Ice Guys, about how everybody in that locker room, you got to get up for Detroit. And
Right.
even though you only play them once a year, all the more reason. But if you know anything about Hawks history and just hockey history, that rivalry, those two original 6 squads, and it goes the same for Detroit. You got to get fired up when you play those rivalry games, even if they aren't division rivals or conference rivals no longer. And for the Hawks to come from behind, Stalock come in net, and relieve Mrazek and get that win in OT, that's a big one. And then a fun one to watch in with Seattle on Sunday. Although I have to say now, as much as I love my Hawks, betting is a whole different thing, and they always tell you don't bet with your heart, and I'm a firm believer in that. And I had money on the Seattle Kraken. I thought that was a weird spot. It was a weird time, a 1 o'clock start at home. And you guys have known it for years. If you've watched Hawks games for the last 3+, 4+ decades, those Sunday games, whether they start at 6 o'clock at night or if they're like the 12:30 with the old NBC starts, Hawks just always kind of started a little slow and a little sluggish. So sometimes it's never really got into it. The crowd was always a little different vibe. It wasn't that rowdy Friday night 7:30 crowd. It was usually a lot of families, a lot of kids. So you just kind of the vibe was just a little off sometimes. And I thought the Hawks were in a bad spot, and they turned around. I mean, they were facing a really bad goalie in Martin Jones for Seattle, but hey, you take advantage of who you play against, and they got the other win. So now they're heading into some tougher competition in the next week, but so far so good. As if as a fan, you still enjoy watching them win, and they've gotten 3 of them so far.
You know what, man? 100%, the timing on these Sunday games, I love them. I love these 1 p.m. These 1 o'clock starts because it's like, it's the middle of the day. It's like, it's kind of like comes as a surprise, because, I get some Blackhawks in the middle of the day, instead of late at night, it's
Right.
like 9, 10 o'clock, by the time the game's over, or even the 6 o'clock starts, man. I really like those because those games are typically done by like, 8:15, 8:30. Yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer those 6 o'clock. As a player, a morning,
Yeah.
afternoon game, those are hard.
Yeah.
Like when you're so used to playing at night, it's a big adjustment. You got to get to the rink like really early, do your workouts and stuff.
Yeah,
And it's gotta
and
affect you
athletes are
guys,
all
so.
the creatures of habit, but most certainly hockey players. And so when your routine gets thrown off, where you usually you're having breakfast and morning skate instead, no, you're getting ready for a game in 2 hours. With a daytime start, that can be a little different. And you see some teams respond to it better than others. You see, a lot of the East Coast teams, they get those 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock starts throughout the year, but then those West Coast teams, they don't really get saddled with those too much. And then when they have to go cross country, sometimes they lay some eggs and play in some flat spots.
So is hockey probably one of the hardest sports to bet on?
Well,
You
I
think?
mean, I can't say that it's the hardest for me personally. I do all right at it, but I think people are
Yeah.
so kind of used to knowing about the point spread. If you have a general semblance of betting, you've heard people talk about the point spread, which in football and basketball, you're laying 6.5. The team's got to win by 7, that kind of a thing. And so money lines, I think, actually might be a little bit easier. Obviously, just in practice, you just need to bet the team that wins the game. But realizing how the numbers move and why is this team an underdog at plus money or a favorite, where you have to lay a certain number to win an amount back. That's kind of a little bit more difficult to explain to someone who's never bet before. But I think as far as hockey and there's advanced numbers, you don't really need to go into the advanced numbers as much as you do if you're betting baseball or even football. The bare bones numbers that you see every day can kind of help you along to be at least a halfway decent better when it comes to hockey.
Well, I think I get a lot of texts in the playoffs. That's when my
Okay.
my buddies that bet, they're not really hockey guys, but they're like, "Hey, who do you got? Tampa Bay 5 goals over or in 2 periods or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, this is tough. Tampa's good, but it's like I don't want you to lose your money, but I mean, I'll go with Tampa on that." But that's like I'm not sure what program they're using, but I think I think it was a Red Wing. I believe it was a Red Wing Lightning game, and it was like
Mhm.
5 goals in the game type of thing. I'm like, yeah, go for it. They ended up getting 6 goals that game or whatever. I think he won like
Yeah.
$200. I'm
Yeah,
like,
and that's the
jeez,
thing,
dude,
and that's
that's awesome.
over unders are the biggest thing, and of course, so yeah, you're talking about the total of goals scored between both teams, and that's
Yeah,
something in my
yeah.
betting career. The what really kind of got me, somewhat notarized, I guess, on Twitter was the first period over trend. And this is the direct result of me watching the Hawks. If you remember a few years ago, they called it the circus trip, obviously late November, but it was the year that the circus had finally officially been canceled. Like Barnum and Bailey actually literally went out of business. But they still had the schedule done where the Hawks were out west. So this is the 1920 season or 18-19 season, I'm sorry. And so that November they're playing against Vancouver. And it's like in the blink of an eye, I think before the first TV timeout, Hawks are down like 2-0 or 3-0. And they interview Patrick Kane afterward. He says, yeah, we've been getting off to some really slow starts. He says, we've got to, we've always had to play catch up. We've been giving up the first goal a lot lately. And so I started looking through the numbers and I go, okay, in the first period, Hawks have been 2 goals total scored, 3 goals. 2-2 in the first period. I go back, this trend has been going on for like 10 straight games. So then I finally looked through the betting numbers. You can bet the first period over 1.5, and that number would be around even money. So basically what it means is if you bet $50, you get $100 bet total, $50 plus your $50 back. It would start going from even money to where you had to lay 6-5, 7-5, so basically $12 to win 10, to the point where you were betting $200 to win $100 because the favorites became so big, because this trend caught on where the Hawks had rattled off 16, 17 games in a row where there was at least 2 or more goals scored in the first period. And I made a note of this. I talked to some people in Vegas about it, and it caught like wildfire. And every betting show you saw, and there weren't that many at the time, of course, because betting expanded even further in the last few years, but every show, everybody was talking about this hockey trend, this first period over trend. And it was me and Ian and the guys over at the Ice Guys who really kind of uncovered this thing. Tampa Bay was in the list. Pittsburgh was in the list. All the great offensive teams that year who had some spotty goaltending issues, they were 2-1, 3-2 first periods, and they would get off these fast starts, and we were able to make a bunch of money with it. Now it's gotten harder because the markets have caught up. But that was the name of the game for a while, and that's what really got hockey betting kind of going with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's got to be tough. Like, you got to look at the backup goalies playing, see who's injured. I would struggle with it for sure.
Well, and that's the thing. I've always considered myself, and I remember my parents told me this. They said I'm a very active fan, in the sense of that all the things that I'm doing now to study for betting on games and writing articles and doing shows, I was doing this when I was a kid, as a fan, just reading I would never go to the game and get a program. I would go get the media guide. I spend an extra $5, but I get to read all this history and information about the teams and different things, and so I've always been interested in kind of digging deeper into the game and watching, because especially now betting on these games, it's like figuring out a puzzle. And essentially watching any sporting event, it's like a puzzle. These two teams have these players and these conditions and these situations. What's going to happen next? And that's the bare bones reason why we love sports. In essence, the competitiveness and trying to see what's going to happen next. It's the best reality TV show in the world. As a quote that I heard from a colleague of mine. So I've always been able to do that, and like I said, at the same time, having a service where I sell picks, which has normally been kind of looked upon as a scummy thing, especially in the 80s and 90s with the 900 numbers and things like that. But it's different now. You have to be transparent and you have to be accurate. And I like to do this. I'm doing this job because there are fans like you guys. Like I said, you don't have time to be looking through all these numbers and information. You got lives, you got families, you've got other jobs. So to have someone who's basically like a financial analyst in the world of sports betting, I think it's a great qualification to find. And if you can find someone who does it well, it's better off than you just throwing darts and betting a game 10 minutes before puck drop.
Yeah. I just wanted to bring up, the only thing that I hate about betting is like, when you put money on something, and then somebody like that one dude, Dominic Roussel, who used to play for Dallas, will come out of nowhere and get a hat trick in a game where, like this guy hasn't scored in like 25 games and something like that happens, like that stuff just drives me nuts.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, they're still random. I think you were thinking Antoine Roussel, by the way.
Antoine Roussel.
Dominic
Yeah, there we
Roussel was
go.
the old Flyers
Yeah,
goalie
yeah, yeah.
Right,
from way
right.
back when. But yeah, but that's the thing. There's still variables, and there's still you have to really dig deep and do things. Just like now, the big trend in all of betting is player props. So people don't always want to bet on teams. They want to bet on Patrick Kane to score a goal, or the over under on saves and different things. And so your Kanes and McDavids and Crosby's of the world, you're not going to get a lot of value betting those. But if you think, hey, Tyler Johnson's getting moved up from the third line to play on the power play, and all of a sudden he gets 2 goals like he did on Sunday, you can catch some good value betting that. So yeah, there's a little bit of that's where I think the fantasy football and fantasy hockey players can really hone in on those things. So that's kind of the overlap into fantasy sports, which is gambling, and then just pure sports betting. So there's ways to find that out, and like I said, if you watch so much of the games, I mean, I may have missed a dozen Hawks games live, like in real time in the last 15 years. And if I missed them when they aired, I caught the replay or highlights the next morning. So when you watch that much hockey or that much of any sport, you should be able to retain, I think, a little bit of something and use it moving forward.
Sure. Is there any players standing out to you right now on the current roster?
As far as just with like betting value, or just
just like a guy where you're like, you know what, I had no idea who this guy was, and whenever I'm watching, all that I see is say number 24 Sam Lafferty. This guy's everywhere, and he's contributing on both sides of the ice. Like, he's someone to me that has really been standing out since game 1 of the season.
Yeah, he has him and also his line mate Jason Dickinson, who they brought over in that trade. Got the game winner on Sunday. Those are two guys that really, and some decent contracts. Not a whole lot of cap space taken up, and still young guys. They're both 27 years of age. They're both pretty solid guys. So when you get in some scoring depth, and that's what the Hawks always had in those winning years. You had 3 lines that could score. Hell, you even had 4 lines that could score at times.
Yeah.
And so finding that balance offensively is huge. So those are 2 guys that really have stepped up. Max Domi as well. I mean, this is a guy comes over, playing on a 1-year deal, trying to he's betting on himself, hoping to get a big time contract. And so far, he looked good, 3 goals. Maybe he's a guy who can really kind of settle in and be a guy who can kind of fill in those gaps. A little bit old. He's 27 as well. So, you're not going just super young and bringing up a bunch of, rookie first year guys. You got some guys who got a little bit of talent and a little bit of grit to them too. We saw, Domi was kind of roughhousing a couple of Red Wings on Friday and so forth. So
absolutely,
I like the build and the concept. I like where Davidson's head is at with the lineup he's built. And he understands the balance aspect. I think he understands it a little bit better than Stan did.
2 things since the beginning of the season where I've kind of flipped at where I'm at right now. At the beginning of the season, I didn't know where Philip Kurashev stood on this team, where he belongs, pretty much anymore. But watching him on this line with Dickinson and Lafferty, I think that this guy has a lot of value for what he's bringing to that line, because you're seeing Lafferty and Dickinson, all over the place. And before Kurashev can be carrying the puck in. Next thing you know, they're pushing on the offensive side of in the offensive zone and putting serious pressure. And I think one big thing that, on top of these guys kind of just showing up out of nowhere, they're bringing big value with Philippe Kurashev. And number 2, Ruse. I think his name is Philippe Ruse too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, yep.
Yeah. I had no idea who this guy was at the beginning of the season. I couldn't believe that he made the team. And then I've been watching him play, and you know what, man? This guy seems like he's got like ice in his veins. Like, he's just kind of, I don't want to say laid back, but he's very, very, I want to say attentive to what he's doing. He's not getting excited when he's in his own zone and he's got guys circling around, He just seems like he's back there making good plays, not, flashy plays and not bad plays, but he's consistently making good plays, which, to be honest with you, is the direction that we're looking to go. Have you noticed this guy at all?
Yeah, and it's interesting because my initial comparison, kind of watching his game a little bit, and he's also from Sweden. Kind of reminded me of how Nicholas Hjalmarsson started. He just kind of just under the radar. Nobody really talked about him. He just quietly kind of played in his own zone, did the right things, the little things the right way. Like I said, not flashy, not gonna break out and he's not a Cale Makar who's gonna just streak down the ice, blow past everybody, and have a highlight reel goal. But he's gonna do those little things right, and that's what you need. You need that development, and you need to build that within your defense. Like you want your flash naturally. You want your flashiness to be all on offense, but you want the stability to be on the back end. And if you can get that stability, not just in your top two, defensemen, but all six defensemen, you want to have as much stability on the blue line as possible. Especially when you look at our goaltending situation. Peter Mrazek, who was shaky to begin with, and I mean he's been injury prone his entire career, and sure enough, not only does he go down with injury, but it's a groin injury, which it's basically like pitchers in baseball. When you start talking about goalies having groin and knee issues, those are things that never really fully clear up in a given year.
No
So
good.
yeah, it's tough. And then Alex Stalock, I've actually been really stunned by the way he's played because he's from up until the last game,
Up until the last
but
game.
he's from around where I'm
Yeah.
at now in St. Paul. He's actually from South St. Paul, Minnesota, the UMD grad, and I've actually met some people who were friends with him. And when he was with the Wild, basically someone had kind of alluded to the fact that he's just kind of playing out the string of his career. He's trying to get enough games to collect his NHL pension. He's just kind of a backup. He likes being around the boys, and that was just kind of what he was kind of going through. And he had a couple of good seasons, but then he kind of just really fell off. Then you look at last year, he missed all that time. He was dealing with long COVID issues and symptoms. Came back and looked terrible, and I'm thinking, oh man, here he is, 35 years of age, off of arguably his worst health issue and worst career numbers, and I alluded to, well, we're tanking, right? Might as well get the worst goal you could find, and I thought that was kind of the case of what they were doing with Stalock. But he's really kind of emerged, as playing well, and I think maybe what you see with veterans sometimes is that they get around some younger guys and they get kind of reinvigorated themselves. So maybe he was thinking about just calling it career and going fishing for the rest of his life. But now he's maybe he's reinvigorated by seeing this young group of guys trying to work hard and rebuild something, and that's given him some inspiration and some new life as well.
Where was
He was
last
with
year?
the Edmonton and Bakersfield. In that organization, and his Bakersfield numbers were horrible. I think he had like a 7.8 goals against and like 5 starts. It was bad.
Well, I thought his first start was good against Vegas. I thought he did pretty well. I thought I thought the goaltending has been good up until the Kraken game. I watched the highlights. I was actually at a wedding yesterday, so I missed the game, which I'm disappointed because it was
Yeah, it was.
a shootout. But I just noticed all those goals. He literally was overplaying the shots so bad, and the Hawks easily could have won that game 5-1.
Yeah, and that is the thing. He's a very aggressive goalie in that style, and that's kind of his caveat over the years. He's let in some soft goals because of that. He's gotten caught out of position, so that's something.
Yeah.
And like I said, the Blue Liners are going to have to step up and realize that and kind of cover for him a little bit. But he's going to have to come through and make some big saves as well. So it's a work in progress. Yeah,
he's got to adjust. I think when you're an old man like that,
sure.
35 is old for a goalie. If you're overplaying shots like that, you got to be fast to recover. And honestly, he wasn't even recovering. He was just like, I'm fishing out here and I'm gone. And that guy just
hung out to dry.
His
post movement isn't as sharp as it once was. So yeah, like I said, he has to adapt and adjust to that. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it is Seattle.
Well, better offense this year. Their offense has leaps and bounds better of what they were trying to do last year.
Oh, but if we're playing against really good teams and he's overplaying pucks like that, we're gonna get lit up. And that's where it's like, oh, okay, maybe we do look like the tanking Hawks now, but it sucks because I thought Mrazek was decent. I liked his first period against the Avalanche, game 1. He was making some really big glove saves, flashy, and I like that. But like you said, that groin injury is like a pitcher's arm. I mean, that's a big thing for a goalie. So
I don't know.
how long
They're
he's going to be
saying
out
just
for.
if they're kind of taking it week to week is what I would last read, but like you said, yeah, it's going to be tough. And Mrazek, when he's healthy, he's great. We've seen him put up some decent numbers when he was back back in Detroit, Carolina, yeah, a little
Detroit,
time in
Carolina.
Toronto as
Yeah.
well. When
Yep.
he's healthy and he's got good defense in front of him, he's arguably a top 50, top 25, top 15 goalie, middle of the road. But that's not bad in this league these days. But when he gets hurt and then it takes him a while to kind of adjust and recover, that's not really good. So now, like I said, Stalock with those, with the issues of getting caught out of position and having that kind of lack of speed that we see from Mrazek, him being the starter, and clearly he's going to get the bulk of the starts because I just read before we started this that he's going to be the starter for both Tuesday's game against Florida and Thursday against Edmonton. He has good numbers against both teams, but like you said, if he's getting caught out of position against McDavid and Draisaitl, who knows what the Oilers can do in that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even the boys in
absolutely.
Florida,
Yeah.
Barkov,
Even
man,
being
he'll
in
make you pay.
in position
Yeah.
against McDavid, you're out
Yeah.
of position.
Right, exactly, definitely.
Well, they're saying that Arvid Soderblom's going to get some starts as well. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to see where this guy is in his development.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
need to
we
see
need to see
more
more.
and better because
I mean,
I've
I
watched
feel we didn't get it.
a good chunk of him. Obviously, the games he played with the Hawks last year, but I watched some of his starts with Rockford, and I'm not really. I don't think he's the answer. I don't think he's going to be a guy who's around here in about 2 or 3 years when we start having some cap space and start making some big moves. I think he's probably going to be elsewhere, but he's just more of a stopgap for the moment. I don't really see him being a career NHLer, to be honest.
Do you think that the Blackhawks going forward, like say when the team is getting to a position of where they're looking to compete, that they just buy a goalie?
I'd like to see him do that. I mean, historically, that really hasn't worked, to be honest, because what the last goalie we bought was Halby Bullen. Granted, we didn't really build another team, a much of a rest of a team around him. But all of our great goalies were either diamonds in the rough, guys like Antti Niemi or Scott Darling, or we homegrew them in Corey Crawford. So I and even Eddie. Eddie was a diamond in the rough back in the day. So the Hawks historically buying goalies hasn't really been like the fancy move, but I think that might have to be the way they go. Now, Drew Comesso, I've heard nothing but good things about him, and I've seen some of his stuff down in BC, or up, I should say, up at BC, Boston College. But I would like to see how he handles with a full AHL season. Maybe he could be somebody who factors in the equation 2-3 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice, but I think Florida's going to try to upload the massive anvil and anchor that is Sergei Bobrovsky's $10 million a year contract.
Brutal.
Yeah, they have the money to bury that kind of contract.
Well, cool, man. Matt, do you got anything else?
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you, Alex, who do you got?
So I like
the
New York Rangers, and this team is the way that they're playing right now. Igor Shesterkin is arguably one of the best goaltenders in the world. We all know how good Artemi Panarin can be, and he's been lights out, basically averaging 2 points per game right now. Back-to-back goals, back-to-back nights, over the weekend. And of course, the rumor has been, if Patrick Kane gets moved, one of the teams that could really make a splash for him would be the Rangers. The renewal of Kane and Panarin in the Eastern Conference, I think that would be absolutely lethal. You mix that up with the good defenseman they have and a world-class goaltender. We saw how far they were able to make it last year and not have that offensive punch. A number 88 makes everything better. It makes everything better offensively. So I like the New York Rangers. And at the beginning of the year, I was really high on the Minnesota Wild, to be honest. I thought that they had, even though they're cap strong, but the core that they have and they have a great nucleus of young players that will be making an impact in the league for years to come. Kirill Kaprizov, obviously, at the top of that list, but some of those guys, Rossi, Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek is definitely going to be a multiple Selke Trophy winner if he can stay healthy throughout his career. He's one of the best two-way forwards in the game. So But our old buddy Marc-Andre Fleury not looking so good here in
He's getting
downtown St.
booed.
Paul. Yeah, getting booed
Yeah.
already. So, but
Oh,
I guess
man.
it looked like it was a great move because they flipped out Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot goes down for 7 weeks in Ottawa, so they thought they were doing the right thing. But now you might have to run with Philip Gustafson, 21-year-old kid who did not look that sharp in Ottawa or even his time in Detroit. So that was my pick for the Western Conference, but it might have to change that a little bit moving forward.
Yeah. What
Yeah, I mean,
about
Edmonton just can't seem to get out of their own way when it comes to the playoffs. They made a great
Yeah.
run last year, but
That's true.
they're where Toronto should be right now. Like Toronto has their own world of issues, but at least Edmonton's making the playoffs and winning some series once they get there. But no, I think Jack Campbell's a great fill-in. He's much better than Mike Smith. Stuart Skinner has kind of developed into his own as a good number 2 option, which is what you need to navigate through the tough regular season. You got to have that top goalie to stand up and carry you through the postseason, but you have to have a 1A, 1B, or a good number 1 and number 2 setup to win in the regular season and get into the playoffs. And I think Edmonton does have that. We know the offensive talent they have, flourishing with those top 6 forwards. So they're never going to struggle for goals, but they might struggle for the consistency in the back end. I think Jack Campbell, in due time, will help that get a little bit better.
Yeah, I like that kid. I thought that was a good signing, and I don't understand what Toronto was doing with the goaltending. I mean, Matt Murray, really, it hasn't worked in years, and then now they're stuck with Samsonov. He's not bad, but I think they should make a big trade. I'd go after
See?
Gibson from the Ducks if I were them, because this kid needs a team in front of him. He's such a good goalie.
I agree with you on Gibson. I'm a big Gibson fan, but I'm not liking what I'm seeing from him. And I think he's playing through an injury, and I think he's tried to play through an injury before. He's logged in a ton of minutes because Anaheim's just been a really bad team for some time, and he's had to log in a lot of minutes. And I think it's starting to wear on him, which is very unfortunate because he's still a fairly young guy. I think he's 28, so he's yeah.
He's got to do a lot.
Right. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, and so he has a lot on his plate, and I don't know if going to Toronto would be the best thing for him because Toronto's the place they eat up goalies and spit them out. And and with that said, with Ilya Samsonov, as you mentioned, you kind of said, well, he's not that bad. I think he's actually a decent goalie, a more than average goalie, in my opinion. I think he kind of got the raw end of the deal in Washington, and he kind of, he needed to change the scenery. And I think the pressure of Toronto is a more of a welcoming to him than a deterrent to some other guys. So, so far he's 3-0, and as they head into game tonight against Vegas, but I think this is definitely one of those storylines where I think he might blossom into being that number 1 goalie, and that's great for Toronto because, like I said, Matt Murray isn't the answer. But if Matt Murray can return to even half the form he was in Pittsburgh and be a number 2 behind Samsonov, now you've got a tandem that you've needed in Toronto for years, and now you can just worry about the offense shipping in consistently, which other than Austin Matthews, it's been some guys you can't find with a telescope, as my buddy Ian Cameron would say.
Oh man, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah, it's one of his signature catchphrases. I had to throw that one in there and give him the credit for it.
I want to say, man, with Edmonton made it to the was at the Western Conference Finals with Mike Smith, with Jack Campbell, considerably they might be able to win a couple games.
Yeah, it's quite possible, and that's the thing, having a firm number 1 goaltender once you get into the postseason, that's really the biggest point because you start having those question marks and not listen. There's also been some teams. We saw it with our Hawks with, like I said, Scott Darling having to come in and kind of save the day when Crawford was shaking a little bit. You sometimes need to have a good backup there too, but I think at the end of the day, when with these teams that have had playoff issues for some time, they need solid goaltending. Edmonton's issue has been goaltending. Toronto's issue has been goaltending. Even when you look at teams that are trying to rebuild, like Philadelphia, Philly's had their issues with goaltending for literally 25 years. Right, exactly. So that's really the end all be all. It's not necessarily as important as a quarterback in football, but it's very, very close in the pantheon of positions in sports.
Well, cool, man. I'd like to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah,
We're really appreciative. It was a great conversation.
Thanks guys for having me on. I appreciate it.
Very fun.
Just talking hockey. We got to do this again sometime.
Oh yeah, most certainly. I'm like, if we talk about the Hawks, like I said, I could spend hours with that. So
he's a Blackhawk nut on Twitter. I'm always putting random Hawks, and he's like the first guy to name them every time.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. In the next couple months or so, next time we talk, the Hawks could be a team that nobody saw coming. Kind of like the Islanders a couple years ago, where out of nowhere they're making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then they kind of just die off after that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and now you got to look at kind of talk from the betting angle. Maybe look at Luke Richardson, take a flyer for him to win Jack Adams. Maybe he could be a finalist depending on how good this team. Even if this team is 500 at the end of the year, no one saw that coming. Wouldn't he be one of the top 3 coaches? To take this team from what seemed to be kind of the bottom of the barrel to somewhat competitive overnight.
Especially considering, from on paper, there was a better squad last year, and they started, what was that, 0-11 or something like that?
I think it was 0-9-1.
Yeah, brutal.
Well, these guys don't quit. You could just tell with the coaching. These guys
and the one
hard for 60 minutes.
And the one thing I was kind of worried about was the fact that we brought Derek King back in what essentially was a demotion from interim head coach to assistant coach, but he's worked really well, and I think the kind of inspiration and spark we saw when he took over the team last year, we're starting to see that now, and Luke Richardson's kind of adding into that. So if we can find some balance in the coaching staff, that's that looms large for what's going to happen in the future.
Absolutely. So do us a favor. Why don't you put out your social media information so our listeners can give you a follow on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you're at.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. My personal Twitter is AX Smith Sports. My podcast is The Ice Guys at _Ice Guys. Just follow that Twitter link and you'll be able to find me. You'll be able to find my co-host Ian Cameron. Our podcast, we're on every single day during the season, Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, noon Eastern on Saturdays and Sundays. We do live betcasts during the year. So once a week, we'll just all sit around, crack some drinks open, get on the big StreamYard stream, and we're all watching games and betting live. We do that for about 3 hours. We're doing it once a month during football season. Once football's over, we'll start doing it once a week. So people can check us out there. The Ice Guys, at _Ice Guys on Twitter, and me at AX Smith Sports.
Cool, man. So once again, guys, give this guy a follow. He's awesome. Obviously, he knows what he's talking about. And we're going to have you on again, man, maybe in a couple months or so after the season's, got its legs under him.
Wonderful. Sounds good. Thanks, guys, for having me.
All right, guys. This is the Tomahawk. We're out of here.